Okay, first of all, thanks y'all for the big support on the previous video. I'm very excited about making more content about Sonic on this channel after seeing that y'all like it. That's really important to me. And second, yeah, I know that sometimes I speak too fast. Trust me, I'm trying my best to improve my speaking since English isn't my first language. But I'll try my best this time to speak a bit better so I can be understood well. Now, let's start with the second part. After the great success that Sonic 1 was, Sega decided to put all of its effort into making a sequel that would be bigger than the original Sonic 1, with new additions like a new partner called Tails, new pixel art that looks more vivid and colorful than the first game, new mechanics that will improve the gameplay, the addition of a 7th Chaos Emerald that will probably be one of the best creative decisions in the entire franchise, and obviously a new level of detail that we want to analyze this time. With one of the hardest marketing campaigns ever seen in the video games world, Sonic 2 will become the second best-selling game on the Sega Genesis, just behind the first Sonic game. But there's a lot of things that this game didn't add in its final release, mainly due to the language barriers between the teams that developed the game. A big part of Sega Japan will come to Sega America to develop this game, and the other part of the team from Japan will develop another game that we will talk about in another moment. This mix would give us one of the best Sonic games of all time, with one of the best level designs that we could know. So without further ado, let's start with the video. This game will come us with one zone that would redefine the style of zone that the classic games would have from then on. The Emerald Hill Zone is essentially a second part of Green Hill Zone, because the level shares the same art decision as the previously mentioned zone, but with some niche difference. Flowers, palm trees, ground with kinda square texture, and the loopings. Except for the totems, that are not part of the West Side Island culture, apparently. A cool addition this time, that would become a recurring gimmick in the franchise, is the Mobius Bands, an infinite-style loop that is one of the star signs of the franchise. The background of Emerald here is similar to Green Hills, a field blessed with flowers, hills, and a great ocean, but this time we can see two islands besides the Big Sea. And for anybody who doesn't know, Sonic doesn't come from Soul Island, he comes from another island called Christmas Island, so it wouldn't be weird to think that those two islands are the ones that I mentioned. The model describes Emerald Hill as a beautiful zone with green meadows and rich waterfalls. Run at high speed through the loops and the corkscrews. Beware of the monkeys and bees that aim you from the tops of the trees. A cool detail that not many people know is that originally Sonic 2 was supposed to be a time travel adventure, a concept that was transferred to Sonic City instead of Sonic 2. That's why Hilltop Zone is similar to Emerald Hill in the design. It's not specified if Hilltop Zone was gonna be a past or future version of Emerald Hill, but the title remained until the game was released. Visually speaking, through all three games, we always start with an island. At the time, we were developing in San Francisco, and south of there was a town called Emerald Hill. We were doing a location test at a shopping center there when we saw it, and since it was a Green Hill-like name, we thought, well, let's use it in the game. Chemical Plant is the most emblematic level of Sonic 2, and just as Green Hill Zone is for Sonic 1, this zone will be recreated in the next games a couple of times. This zone acts as a factory owned by Eggman. Dr. Eggman's chemical factory. Run around inside the pipes that are stretched all over the place, aim for the goal by dodging turntables and blowing chemicals. The US manual also says that a toxic liquid called Megamac is created in this factory. I think it's just a fake toxic, cause it acts as the same as the water in the levels with water. The zone shines for its frenetic design. There are not so many annoying places in this zone, besides that particular part of Act 2 that used to frustrate me a lot as a kid. I hate this part. There are always frenetic paths to run through, and the way you cross the next part of this factory through the network of pipes was always so cool to me. I always thought the background was a different place compared to the chemical plant, because those buildings looks more like a normal building that you could find in real life. So once we go deeper into this factory, the place can remind us of perfect segment bases. Another trivia that many people don't know is that originally Sonic 2 was going to have, hear me out, 8 theme zones, and Chemical Plant was gonna be the 10th zone in the game. Due to the cut content, the zones were changed in order many times. That would be a good reason behind an Eggman's factory being part of the first zones in the game. At first this stage was set to appear about at first zone 10. Although that would be fewer acts this time, we thought having about 80 zones would be good, but having each zone stand out and fit in the story in a way that was easy to follow. In the end it dropped it down to 11 zones, and Chemical Plant was placed as the second stage. In the end, it was a success. Aquatic Green is probably one of my favorite zones in the game, especially for the music. The place has the vibes of having been created by an ancient civilization, and as its name says, now it's submerged and completely abandoned, just having the memory of what it could have been. The ruins of a dismissed civilization within a forest. Let's explode stone pillars hanging on the ground and hide them underwater. Watch out for tricky arrows and falling pillars. The design of the level is pretty unique, because it has two different parts that have nothing to do with each other. First, exterior, a place that can remind us of some real ruins, with some different style loopings that are unique of this zone, the waterfalls, and the rare form of the ground. The background of the level reinforces that the model says. The rings are hidden inside a big forest, and just at the end of it, you can see the mountains of West Side Island. The underwater part is a bit different. The different pillars and structures that this civilization created are now a shadow of what they were, falling and breaking as we cross these underwater paths. The top and the bottom of this stage are built completely differently. The loops along the top are a bit different from normal. The water also had to have the transparency set exactly right. And then, there are so many places where the routes intersect. From Sonic 2 on, we took a patent in America. Also, a cool detail that this zone has is that it was originally called Neo Green Hill Zone. According to certain prototype version of Sonic 2, this was supposed to be the first level of the game. And yeah, the name and the idea of the zone being the first level were changed in the end, but Sega will use this idea for another Sonic game that would come years later. Casino Night Zone is probably the father of all the casino levels that would come after it. I know Springer Zone is technically a Casino Lammies level, but Casino Night would lay the foundation of what a casino level should be for the next Sonic games, the seat of neon and pinball. Bet your luck on slot machines and earn rings by hitting the jackpot. Just the flippers well, the background of the level this time acts as a way to show the player that he's in a fancy city. The level doesn't stand out for its starry night sky like Starlight, but for the vibes of being in a place that looks alive all the night, a city that never sleeps, where you can either win a lot of rings or lose them all. The pinball gimmicks everywhere are cool as well, and the jackpots are one of my favorite additions to the franchise. And if you are lucky enough, you can hit 999 rings in this stage, the maximum number of rings that you can get in the entire game. This level is based on the casinos from Las Vegas, during the trip that the Japanese team took when they traveled to those sites. Wink. These slot machines are based on our experience going to casinos while working in America. Riding in a car, it would take about 4 hours to take to Las Vegas. We would cut those trips entertainment research, but the game does contain a lot of reference to the things that we experience in America. This level is created not necessarily to match this story, but just for the fun of the developers. Cause honestly, if you ask me, there's no sense in having jackpots, signs, or references to Sonic and Tails everywhere when this is the first time that they go to this level canonically, unless they had prophesied this before. Nah, I guess I'm talking about the wrong game. Hilltop Zone is one of my least favorite zones, to be honest. The music and the design are meh for me. But well, we are now at the top mountains of West Side Island. Oh, and remember that in the start of the video I said that the islands in the background of Emerald Hill could be Soul Island and Christmas Island? Well, it looks like that island is still part of West Side Island, and the mountains that we see from Emerald Hill are Hilltop Zone. Cable cars and seesaws on a high mountain. A suspicious rumbling sound can be heard underground. Usually it's the rising lava and ground to advance. This level is pretty interesting to see. We try to cross the different sections to finally get through the level, but sometimes the vibes can change suddenly from the time to time. Suddenly we are in the exterior watching the mountains and the clouds behind us, giving the sensation of being to hike, and suddenly we can also be inside some caverns with a lot of lava that will try to incinerate us. Also, the lava sections are pretty unique because the screens start to shake hard, giving the sensation of an earthquake. The thing that stands out most in this zone is probably the way the wall screen shakes in the areas where the lava is moving, and then the mountain in the background has a slightly polygon-like look to it. We were aiming for a look similar to the kind of things we had in mind with Sonic 1's Green Hill Zone. After all that volcanic section, we reach Mystic Cave, one of the most iconic zones in Sonic 2. A cave with mysterious vibes and a lot of enemies, the Abyss, the bunch of spikes and gimmicks to cross through the level, and the tons of mechanisms. But we can't forget the main reason why this level is so iconic, and it is this trap. Yeah, this is not funny, man. A mysterious cave that spreads out underground. Open the gates by hanging onto the ivy. Be careful and watch out for the crumbling platforms and use the springboards to jump over the spikes that pop out. The level is not just an old cave. It looks like the place was visited before due to the different sections of platforms and wooden floors. Probably this place was supposed to be a mine under exploration. Usually, I don't talk about the bosses in these videos, but while I researched information about this zone, I found that Eggman's Reel 2 was created to search for the cave emeralds under this cave. So probably this zone is not just a normal mine to be explored. The place was supposed to contain one of the cave emeralds within the caverns. Something that would be reaffirmed in the remake by Christian Whitehead, because you can find a secret path to a mysterious zone that mimics Hidden Palace Zone from Sonic 3. Curious, to be honest. The field here is a haunted house, isn't it? But we ended up making a cave stage instead. When making this map, first we had drawn the island. There was a cave, there was a lake, a mountain, a construction site. We were thinking of all these areas, like Sonic would be here at first and then he'd go someplace else. That was part of the cave. And originally this place was called Dust Hill Zone instead of Mystic Cave, but I guess they changed it in the end due to the big number of levels that would have Hill in their name. Once we get through the ancient caverns, we reach Eggman's Refinery. Oil Ocean Zone is not one of my favorite zones, but it reinforces the idea of Robotnik setting up his bases to fully develop his different badniks and ships. This refinery, as its name says, is completely covered in oil. Trying to run through the oil is practically impossible. You can't use the spin dash either, and as the time passes it can starve you and take your life if you don't jump fast. Dr. Eggman has spilled oil into the sea. You can't use your favorite dash on slippery oil. Advance by making full use of lights, fans, and gas cylinders. This is not a zone where you can feel free to move, because there's always a robot or a trap waiting for you. And also, I don't know if it's just me, but the background of the level already gives the sensation of being in a very warm place. The music doesn't help either. But the good part is that there are no signs of life in this level, so the only ones that experience this heat are the robots, and you as players, sadly. This stage was made by Tom on the Sega of America staff. It was amazing what could be made with the Mega Drive at the time, but if the sonicness of it wasn't coming true, sometimes the artist had a taste for darker color schemes. We would fix up certain pieces of it. From now on, the zones start to be fully creations of Dr. Robotnik, and with all the oil that he gets from Oil Ocean, he can create a big mechanical city. The zone is so big that it's even the only level in the game that has 3 acts instead of 2. Steampunk Citadel dominated by gears and steam. Turn the node and jump with the steam bulb. Dr. Eggman must be beyond the rotating drone. Metropolis Zone is the capital of Eggman's creations, an industrial city that is full of different mechanisms and weird paths that we have to cross to finally reach the center of the Citadel. The transporters from Scrap Brain came back this time. Probably Eggman loves to put these things on his greatest creation to move fast within the different areas. You can take a breath anywhere, because there's always a spike, an enemy, or a lava lake that can make you lose your patience. Definitely, this is probably one of my favorite mechanized and ambience levels of the classic games. The whole factory is created to make you feel that you're running through the main fortress of the island. Looking for more information about this zone, I found that this level is based on the old factories of the Industrial Revolution. Though some of the first ideas were replaced by the ones that formed the level as we know it now, there's a lot of concept art that shows how this level was originally going to look. Really curious though. Act 3 was gonna be a zone in the first half that could only appear once, but it was cut and placed after the Act 2. We had already finished the map, and it would have been a shame to waste it. Once we defeat Eggman, we head to the sky in an aerial pursuit between the Tornado and the Wing Fortress. Sonic and Miles follow Dr. Eggman in the Tornado. Spin jump on the wings. The first aerial battle has begun. Sky Chase Zone is probably one of the chiller levels of the game. There's not really much to do besides dodging the bullets of the enemies and not falling asleep during the level. The auto-scrolling gimmick of this level used to be boring to me when I was a kid. I started to enjoy the level for what it is, instead of wanting to reach the epic parts faster. This level is more like a break for the player to catch their breath after a zone like Metropolis, and one of the developers has a lot to say about this zone. I'll leave you with the comments of Yasushi Yamaguchi, the chief artist behind the zones and character designs. Probably the least difficult and boring breather stage in Sonic 2. The graphics here are my responsibility. Or rather, this stage is a pre-production stage for Wing Fortress, which will eventually be moved to the space. So why not consider it as a set with Wing Fortress and separate this as a stage? There was that. But for some reason it ended up being a different stage, so the background is the same. Well, since the previous Metropolis zone was up to Act 3, the difficulty level was high, and there was no save function. Players won't be able to concentrate, so I hope they will recognize this as a point to take a break. It was also in the final stage of the development process that all the staff members were pretty exhausted. If it had a save function like the current port, it would be better to work on the gameplay a little more and make it a stage that is on par with other stages. And the Tornado will probably be the Sonic's jump destination. I think the difficulty levels only increase it just by removing the part that serves as a foothold to save the player from falling to the death. This is where Sonic's favorite aircraft, the Tornado, appears for the first time. And at first, I wasn't sure what to do with it, but I thought a retro plane would be better suited to being an adventurer than a high-tech, smart mech. That was decided. Originally Sonic was using it alone, so instead of a two-seat mode, it was a single-seater, with Miles controlling the aircraft and Sonic standing on the wings. The start of Wing Fortress welcomes us with a burst of lasers. One of them shoots down the Tornado, and we have to continue our journey alone this time without Tails, a massive aerial battleship that has appeared before you. If you take one wrong step, you'll be tumbling head over heels into the sky. Watch out for rotating propellers and catapults. The aerial fortress is big. It has nothing to aim by from the levels with 2 acts. One wrong step and you'll fall. This level is divided into 3 parts, as I like to see it. The first part being the lower part of the fortress, where you must find a way to cross the ejectors of the airship, using the different handholds to prevent falling into the void. Big ventilators and platforms that appear and disappear will make your task a bit harder as well. There is also a different path that is similar to an underwater section of Labyrinth Zone, where instead of water pushing Sonic through the section, this time is the one that pushes Sonic, and he must use parts of the airship to calculate where he must go. The second section is the part above the fortress. This is easier than the previous section, and the only thing that you must be afraid of is finding the correct way to keep going through the level. You usually go under and above the fortress so many times. This stage is the same as what appears in Sky Chase, so you can see that the entire thing is in the shape of an aircraft. Making the stage into the shape of an aircraft was particularly difficult. When playing as Super Sonic, making delicate movements becomes a bit difficult, but it still seems too bad that you can't fight the final boss with him. At the end, we reach the final section, the control room of the stage. Once you defeat the Eggman's barrier, the Doctor decides to escape in a spaceship, and Sonic can't keep up, because technically at this point he didn't know how to transform into Super Sonic yet. So how will he be able to reach the spaceship? Well, don't forget that our two-tailed friend has an IQ as high as Eggman after all. Tails appears again to help Sonic reach the spaceship. Probably a lot of people missed this, but the Tornado now has a new implementation that helps the lane gain the speed to catch Eggman. Not everything is lost. Sonic catches the ship, and all we can see is that we're getting higher and higher than before, even seeing the space. All this travel was done to finally reach the final zone and the final battle of the game. Now we are in the Death Egg Zone, the final zone and battle of this game. Now we are in the Eggman's last bastion, a place that is obviously based on the Death Star from Star Wars. We can see the space through the windows of the orb, and the layouts of the zone are practically the same as Chemical Plant, but with a different color palette. There are no rings in this stage, so you must have a lot of lives if you want to make it to the end. This level is divided into two battles. The first one is the fight against a gimmick that will be recurring in the next classic Sonic games, a battle against a robotic doppelganger, Mecha Sonic. Yeah, I know that this specific robot technically has no name and it's also called Silver Sonic, but I'll call it this way to simplify the things. Eggman watches the battle through a TV from the center of the room, and the robot appears from above to start his attacks. Mecha Sonic has 4 attacks. The first one is a rocket boost across the ground that can be punished by spin attacking him. The spin dash across the ground that can't be punished and you must dodge to avoid that. Another variation is the spin dash but while jumping across the stage. So if you thought that just jumping will avoid Mecha Sonic, I'm sorry. It's not that easy. And if the battle extends for too long, another variation of the spin attacks can appear, where Mecha Sonic releases his needles once he jumps. You must react fast or defeat him faster to avoid this part and move on to the next boss battle. Once we defeat him, Eggman appears and starts to run to his final creation. Yeah, it's hilarious that we can catch Eggman being the fastest being alive, isn't it? Eggman hops into the robot's head. And now we have to fight against one of the hardest bosses in the classic Sonic game, mainly due to the fact that this robot has 2 ways to defeat him, one being the impatient way, and the other being the patient way. And as a Sonic player of all time, I did the impatient way. The ambience of this battle is always epic to me, the background marking the place where we are, alone against a manic scientist that wants to rule the world by himself, and we are here to finally defeat him. The boss is pretty hard, due to the limited ways to attack him. The only ways are to wait and attack once he falls because he squats and becomes vulnerable, or the way that they do, attack him once the spikes of the arms are in the middle of his wall to make things faster. Once we defeat him, the Death Egg starts to explode, and the cutscene changes Tails watching the explosion with the flickies from West Side Island. He moves the tornado and goes to help Sonic and see what happened. If you got the 7 Chaos Emeralds, Sonic will finally use his super form to escape from the explosion. With the flickies accompanying Tails, Sonic flies with Tails on the tornado, marking the end of one of the best titles in the history. Finally being able to take a breath after such a great adventure. Or maybe not. Who knows? The special stages of Sonic 2 are completely different compared to the first game. This time, the way to enter these levels is by getting 50 rings. But instead of entering to a big ring at the end of the level, we can enter these zones once we pass through a checkpoint. These levels have a tubular design where we must collect a big number of rings. At the start of the level, we know the number of rings we need to collect. The levels have 3 sections, and if you don't get the necessary number of rings to each section, the level ends. But if you get all the rings, you'll get the Chaos Emerald. There are also bombs that will make your task harder, but all these levels are always the same. So it's just about practice. Once you get the 7 Chaos Emeralds, you unlock not just the good ending as in the previous game, but also the new feature that would become an emblematic sign of the Sonic games through the years, Super Sonic, a form obviously inspired by the Super Saiyan. In this form, Sonic is practically except for falls and cruising hazards. For anyone wondering why there are already minutes left in the video if I already talked about all the zones, well, Sonic 2 is probably the classic Sonic game with the most unused content in the entire series. Most of this unused content is due to the problems between the Japanese and American teams because of the communication issues. So let's talk about these unused zones that were part of the development but weren't released in the final version. Hidden Palace Zone is one of the most infamous cuts of the original game. The level wasn't finished, but there were screenshots of it. Originally known as Secret Palace Zone, this level would be brought back thanks to the Christ and Whitehead remake, making this zone a very particular one with some fake Master Emeralds. This level is accessible through the infamous pit in Act 2 of Mystic Cave, and after noticing that Eggman was looking for the Chaos Emerald through the caverns of Mystic Cave and that this zone is under those caverns, it wouldn't be weird that this zone could contain something really important. Besides the fake Master Emeralds, probably something important was here, a submerged palace with crystals and emeralds everywhere. But there are some levels that didn't have the luck to be recreated in the remake. One of these levels is Genocide City Zone, a zone that looks very similar to Scrap Brain, Actually, it looks like a Scrap Brain Zone Part 2, because the level also had an act with submerged caverns like the zone previously mentioned. According to some theories, this zone was originally the one that succeeded Metropolis Zone Act 2, because in Yuji Naka Zone's words, the Act 3 was supposed to be a whole different zone, but it was changed in the end due to time limitations. Wood Zone was partially developed, and it can be tested through some prototypes of Sonic 2, a forest-themed zone that just has one act, because the second act is completely empty. Some VHS recordings of the level can be found as well. Even though the level was left until the end of the development, this level would be useful for other levels in the franchise, because some of the gimmicks that this level had would be used in other Sonic 2D styled games. Desert Zone is probably the most popular unused zone in the game, because it would become the inspiration for Mirage Saloon in Sonic Mania, an old West styled level that was good in the final version of the game. All the features that this zone had were recycled into additions for the next zones of the different classic Sonic games, and eventually this level was replaced by a level called Christmas Zone, with the same pixel art but with a different color palette. As I said, Christmas Zone shares the same pixel art as the Desert Zone, and works as an alternative version of the zone. Themed as a winter-styled zone with pines and snow everywhere, these zones were probably created as a future and past version of the same place, because remembering that originally Blood was supposed to be a time travel adventure, it wouldn't be weird to think that originally these zones were the same. There are also some zones that were just created for concept art, such as an art of Westside Island that shows the island of the present and the past, Blue Ocean Zone that looks like a completely underwater zone, Tropical Zone that reminds me of Paltry Panic from Sonic CD, Ocean Wind, another water-themed zone but that has features that remind me of Emerald Coast from Sonic Adventure, Madness Mountain, a zone that looks pretty similar to the underground part of Marble Zone, Sacred Jungle that would eventually evolve into Wood Zone, Emerald Isle that looks like an early version of Aquatic Ring, and a snow-covered mountain zone that would evolve into Christmas Zone. All the sound of these games, even the discarded ones, were so special to the development and the storytelling of the game. Even though some of the levels aren't directly related to the story and are more like an inspiration from the team that recreated their experience during the trip through America, these levels had a lot of magic, and would set the foundations of what a Sonic game should have to be considered a good Sonic game. But this is not the end, because we must note what happened to the development team that didn't travel to America, and discover how they developed the plot through the levels of the next game. Let's go!